Welcome. We are pleased to have you join us today for this session of Alluvionic's CMMC webinar series. Today we will be focusing on unpacking the new DFARS clause, our CMMC contract clause. We will start with some introductions. I am joined by a fantastic panel today, and we will have some time for some audience Q&A at the end. Just from housekeeping standpoint, we ask you to stay muted throughout. We will have that Q&A time. There is a Q&A function here within the meeting. So if you look up at the top, you'll see a Q&A box where you can add your questions as they come to mind. And as indicated, we will have some time to talk about those at the conclusion. We will also leave you with contact information for our panelists so that you can connect after the fact. We are recording the session and we will share it with you at the conclusion as well. So to jump into intros, I will be your moderator today. I'm Lizi. Hi. I oversee our commercial services here at Alluvionic. We are a registered practitioner organization, and we're also a government contractor. So we not only help companies in readiness for CMMC, but we are living this alongside you, implementing these controls and ensuring we are protecting controlled and classified information as well. I will turn it over to our panelists for some self-introductions. I will start with Bobby Padilla.
Hi, Lizi. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Bobby Padilla, and I serve as the Information Security Director at Alluvionic. Alluvionic, we are a registered Cyber AB registered practitioner organization. I'm a certified CMMC professional, and I oversee our CMMC compliance team. We also had a successful CMMC Level 2 certification. As Liz indicated, we're also a defense contractor. We were certified CMMC Level 2 in March of this year. Looking forward to sharing our insights and answering any questions you have today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bobby. Matt Brueggemann.
Excellent. Hello, everybody. Matt Brueggemann, Director of Federal Sales here at Align, although my role goes well beyond sales nowadays. So Align, we are a C3PAO, right? CMMC third-party assessment organization. So I get involved with our service delivery team, marketing, sales, partnerships, all that sort of stuff. And then I do these sorts of things. So basically, any way that I can help. Oftentimes that's, on sales calls, joining, answering questions with clients. So I've got a really good understanding, having, as I know Mike and I were talking before we started, Mike and I on a ton of calls nowadays, as you can imagine, very busy topic. So you get a good sort of lay of the land in terms of like, where are people at in the process? What maybe misinformation is out there? What common questions do you see? All that sort of stuff. So happy to dive into it today with all of you and help however I can. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much, Matt. And Mike.
Hi, Mike Crandall. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Digital Beachhead. We provide virtual CISO services, cyber consulting, focused on the Department of Defense and external companies. I'm a retired military guy, so I did 21 years doing cybersecurity for the Department of Defense. We are also a 3CPO, so as a 3CPO, I like to say we are the droids you're looking for, and happy to answer any questions you have. I've been dabbling in cybersecurity now for like 30 plus years.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we are certainly joined by the experts. They are, again, living this CMMC space, and they are working with so many of you, so many organizations that are seeking certification and interested stakeholders in the CMMC ecosystem. So as we move into our panel discussion today, we are, of course, focused on the new contract clause. CMMC has gone through quite the transformation in the last year. It's gone from this theoretical that was introduced to us back in 2020 to real. It is now, it is happening. And there are tons of questions. I know that we field them here at Alluvionic, and I know that the rest of the panel here is fielding these questions as well. So we want to dive in and talk a little bit about what this new clause really means. How is it different? How is it going to impact you? Is it already impacting you? Bobby, could we start with you on just what is it? What is our new 7021 clause all about?
Yeah, so the DFARS 252.204-7021, of course, is effective now, and a week ago now, November 10th. And that's the formal DFARS clause that's going to formally require the defense industrial based contractors to actually hold a CMMC certification. That's going to be contingent on the contract, right? So ultimately, that's that certification. So if it's the CMMC Level 2, they would need to be the requirement that the organization will need to be assessed at CMMC Level 2, and that certification will be good for 3 years.
Awesome. Matt, what kinds of questions are you getting from clients now, knowing that this is effective now? What are they asking you about this clause and how it's going to impact their contracts?
Yeah, so as Bobby mentioned, DFARS 7021 contract clause is what's going to require CMMC. It's going to require CMMC at different levels, and there's like a phased rollout, right? So I think a lot of the questions that I get right now are, hey, I've heard that this is going to be coming into my contracts. When and what level requirement and what actual requirement is coming with it, right? So I think the big thing to sort of touch on at a high level is there is a phased rollout. The DoD basically said, hey, we're not going to flip a switch and all of a sudden require everybody to be level 2 certified overnight. And part of that phased rollout that we just entered, 8 days ago, November 10th, 2025 is when it first started. It's going to be 12 months long, right? And oh, sorry if I was getting ahead of ourselves here a little bit. But basically, it's going to be 12 months long. And what they've stated is the minimum requirement is going to be a level 1 if you handle federal contract information, and then level 2 self-attestation if you handle CUI. But we can get into this. There's some nuance, and we're already starting to see it. Some level 2 certification requirements roll out within this first phase 1 as well. So that's a lot of the questions I get, and then that kind of leads into kind of your point on like budget and timelines and things like that. I mean, I think a lot of people are in project planning mode right now. They are, to your point, taking this sort of seriously for the first time, and understandably, because it was, I call it was the boy who cried wolf for many years. CMMC was, CMMC's coming. Oh, I haven't seen it. CMMC's coming. Oh, I haven't seen it. And so now I think people are a little bit, they're a little bit hardened to, they hear it and they go, okay, are you sure this time? And I think the market has done a good job of saying, yes, it's true this time. Here is how it's real. And so now they're in that like, oh crap, okay, let's take it seriously. What do we need to do? What is the project planning? So I think a lot of people are thinking about trying to work backwards. All right, when is it going to show up in my contract requirements so that I can start to think about my implementation and my assessment timeline and cost? And they're putting all that together, especially since we're, in or at the end of budgeting season for 2026 for a lot of people. It just matches up, right? They're doing a lot of this project planning of like, how am I going to tackle this in 2026? And so the thing that's difficult is we cannot come to you specifically and say, X date is when you are going to see your first requirement for CMMC Level 2 certification, right? It's going to be very client dependent on, when do you bid on contracts? When would you potentially be awarded these contracts? Who are these contracts with? What sensitive information are you going to be handling for those? So there's some nuance, and, again, in one-on-one conversations, we can help dive into that in a little bit more detail. But I'd say that's the biggest thing right now. I've noticed, and Mike, I'm curious your thoughts too. Like, I've noticed a lot of people in that, all right, let's take this seriously. Let's start project planning mode right now.
Yep, absolutely. I'm seeing folks that we've had the people who were the go-getters already signed up, knew what they were doing. The others that were kind of holding off, maybe getting prepared, but weren't ready for an assessment, kind of holding off on when do we need to be assessed. And to Matt's point, the big answer now is we still don't really know when you're going to get the requirement for a formal assessment. The first year as a phase in, as he said, was self-attestation, but it's up to the contracting officer. They can require an actual 3CPO certification. How and when they do that is up to the contracting officer. They're supposed to be few and far between during the first year. But again, that's up to the contracting officer. We can't read their minds. But what I'm beginning to see more of is the primes, those big primes going to their subcontractors. And regardless of what the CMMC contract says, they're coming out and saying, we want you to be formally assessed. If you're going to be a subcontractor of ours, we want you to get formally assessed. So that way we don't have to worry about it later. If we bring you onto our team, and then find out your self-attestment wasn't as, up to snuff as maybe a full assessment. So they're just asking those folks to be assessed right away.
Yeah, that's a great point. So regardless of your direct prime, if you're a prime in that direct relationship with the government, the prime contractors are looking to mitigate risk, and they are certainly getting aggressive in how they communicate with their subcontractors. When we look at this timetable for the rollout, I did have a customer just this week say, oh, so I can probably just hold off until 2028 to get the certification, the third-party certification, because of the rollout taking that time. How can we best communicate the timeline it takes to get ready and what that might look like for clients, and why maybe waiting till 2028 might not be the best approach?
Well, I would say too that the first year is the year, so 26 is the year that it's going to sell self-attestation.
Mm-hmm.
Starting in 27, it's going to be requirement for 3CPO for new solicitations. So if they're waiting and they only get one contract, sure, you can wait to 28 to get that one renewed, say, with a 3CPO. But I would hope most companies want new work, growth, and not rest on their laurels with the one contract they won. So, you need to be thinking that way as well. And just timeline in general, we're booking, because there's a lot of people out there and a very few of us currently in the ecosystem, which is why they're doing the phased approach. So if everyone waits to the last minute, then there's going to be that flood that can't be filled.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Lizi. Also, just to kind of piggyback on what Mike added there about the requirement for 2026, the self-attestation. So again, it doesn't mean you can continue to wait. You have to self-attest. You have to put on a score, SPRS score. And if you perhaps inflate your score, you're still subject to the 7019 clause, which and open yourself up to a potential DIBCAC audit. We have seen that. I think Mike has as well recently. I know recently I helped an organization. They were again randomly selected for a DIBCAC audit, and not really sure what their SPRS score was, but they came on site and assessed them, and they actually failed their assessment. So I helped them generate a plan of action and milestones. They had 7 days to put together a very thorough poem back to the DIBCAC. It actually they had several questions about some of the items, so we went kind of back and forth and ultimately delivered them a good product. And then now, of course, they've got some time and some effort to get after that poem. But certainly that's important that you're reporting accurately and honestly.
Yeah, so even in self-attestation, having that score be accurate, reflective of your true environment, because really, and this has been the case for years, the Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Assessment Center could audit you. They could come in and check and validate that score being accurate. So we may see a lot of that occurring this first year as those self-attestations are the sole primary source, and being sure that you've got accuracy in the reporting. And Bobby, I think it's super interesting that you mentioned the fact that the DIBCAC was pretty particular about that poem. They wanted to ask a lot more questions just to ensure that it truly was addressing the findings that they had identified. It went back and forth, multiple iterations. And Mike, you've had a similar experience interacting with a DIBCAC assessment as well.
Yes, we're in the middle. We've got a client that randomly came up, and DIBCAC said this is a random assessment, and they've got 2 months. They were given a week to upload their SSP and POAM, and then scheduled out 2 months later, they're going to come in and do the actual assessment right after the holidays. So great timing, for the poor client who wanted to enjoy the holidays is now gearing up for a DIBCAC assessment. And then that's how they brought us on. They were like, we want some other professional help than our eyes. And Matt will attest to this, I'm sure. We go through these controls and the 320 objectives. It can be how you interpret it. And if you're not the CMMC professional, you haven't gone through CCA training, you don't know what the cyber AB and the DoD is looking for answers. DIBCAC could come in and they have a clear thought of what they want to see as an answer, and you feel you've answered the question correctly as an organization, but maybe your interpretation's different, and that's where some of those conflicts can come in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good point to highlight here, because as we kind of started the conversation, a lot of the talk in the industry and the questions from OSCs, organizations seeking certification right now, are, hey, what's this phase rollout? And basically they're trying to think about, when is it going to be required for me to have a level 2 certification? And I think that is very important. But what we're touching on here is, as of 8 days ago, any new solicitation will at a minimum require a self-attestation against level 2 if you handle controlled and classified information, right? So if you're still thinking about how and what is my roadmap to implementing those 110 controls, you need to start thinking about that even faster than you do a certification and a level 2 assessment from a C3PO, right? Because as early as 8 days ago, as early as today, you could have something where you would need to have a self-attestation in SPRS against CMMC to properly be able to bid and win the award of a contract. And then to the point that we're talking about here, as we've seen historically, just from these previous DFARS clauses, DFARS 7012, 1920, they can come after you for a False Claims Act is one thing, but also the DIBCAC assessments, they can come in. And what we've seen is they've targeted the higher scores. Like they just want
randomly,
honesty, right? Yeah. Randomly, and then it's like, oh, it's a 108, that's a 110, that's a 110, that's a 108, right? So, be accurate in that, right? And so if you're sitting there and you're going, hey, I can't earnestly and honestly say 110, we can self-attest to level 2, don't do it. Don't do it, right? Make sure that you're getting to the place where you can confidently say we are meeting all these controls before you self-attest to that. For a couple of reasons, right? You can come in, people can come in, hey, you falsely claimed that, but also DIBCAC can come in and assess you. And if you aren't actually prepared and you don't feel confident meeting those controls today, they could come in and say, hey, you self-attested that you were, like, what we came in and you're woefully off. Where did this difference come from? So yeah, I think that's really important to think about now. I think obviously the certification question is very important. When should I get one? When will I need one? And that's again where we get into the nuance. It could be as early as today. But self-attestation, for sure, you need to be thinking about, I need to be compliant to the 110 and be able to self-attest to that.
Is there a minimum score? So when you talk self-attestation, I've heard people ask that question. Is what do I have to have 110 for self-attestation? Is 80% implementation good enough? What does that really mean?
Yeah, I would say if you're saying you're meeting level 2, in order to meet level 2, you have to meet all 110 controls and be compliant. I think people get confused because during a formal assessment, we can find and provide a conditional certificate if you can score an 88 out of the 110 with 1-point controls, because we all know the controls are weighted. So if it's a 1-point control, then we can open a POAM to come back in 6 months to close those out during a formal assessment. But again, we start that formal assessment with the organization seeking certification, the OSC, believing they're 110. We won't come in and start an assessment if they're like, hey, I'm 92 and got a POAM. Well, you're not eligible for an assessment. You have to believe you're 110, and then maybe there's some discrepancies that need some closing out. So they've given that buffer for a temporary conditional certification.
It is a good question. I haven't gotten that a lot, but I could see how there would be that confusion out there. And Mike said it well. Yeah, there's no conditional self-attestation. There's no POAM window that you get. If you're self-attesting to meeting those level 2 controls, you're self-attesting to meeting all of those level 2 controls.
I had that question yesterday.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of these questions, I think, as people who hear one thing and go, oh, conditional, awesome, I can do that. But they don't understand the full nuance of, as Matt said, there's no conditional self-attestation.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there is that room for confusion, because that's what they've been hearing over the last year, is that conditional minimum 80% implemented, score of 88, all of those things. So definitely a completely reasonable area to get tripped up on. So,
Absolutely.
you know, CMMC, this new clause, it puts teeth in it. You know, it's been around for a long time. This is putting the teeth in it. This is the enforcement. We talked about some of those elements for enforcement. But we can also talk a little bit about just the various stakeholder groups and what are the impacts to the different elements of this broad ecosystem of CMMC. And I think, of course, biggest impact is hitting those organizations that are seeking certification. Let's talk about what they need to be thinking about right now. And Mike, you addressed part of it a little bit of the backlog component and the fact that there's a limited number of certified third-party assessment organizations. There's a lot of companies that are going to be seeking that certification. When is the right time to reach out and engage a C3 PAO? Because they want to get on the list, but maybe they do currently have a POAM and they're trying to close things out. What makes sense for when they should start to engage?
My thought would be, as soon as you feel you could self-attest. Now, as a company myself that worked with federal contracts, I would say, and we tell folks, if you're at 80%, you know you've got a couple of POAMs, but you know they're closable. They're not waiting on technology or waiting for funding. It's just, we have to get to this. That'll be done on our next, configuration control board. That would be an okay time to start getting on someone's books. Not looking to do it tomorrow, knowing it's going to be a few months out. So it's okay to plan ahead before you're 100% done, but know that you've self-attest, you know what POAMs you have, you have a closeout date for them. They're not those open-ended, because sometimes I have to buy this new software, this new tech to add to my tech stack to meet this requirement. And you got to go out and do the searching and finding and picking the right one, which you have an unknown timeline on. That's not the time. But when you're like, we've got it bought, we know we've got to get it implemented, and I don't know, Matt, do you feel the same, that it's...
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I tell clients, you can as early as you understand your scope, not earlier than that.
Right.
Because some people come to us and they're like, hey, I want to get on your schedule. I'm like, cool, let's talk through, what are we looking like? And they're like, we don't know yet. We're still trying to figure that out. I'm like, well, what do you want me to scope out, right? So obviously have a good understanding of your scope. And at that point, we can scope out our actual assessment. And if, to Mike's point, this can be riskier if you still have these big decisions and the long poles in the tent of like technology changes and, all these sorts of things. But with the backlogs, I wouldn't shy away from at least having those conversations as early in the process as possible. And depending on the backlogs of the C3PAOs that you really like to work with, you can potentially get under contract. How we operate is if you wanted to get under contract with us, you wanted to work with us, but you're still 6 months out, like that's totally okay. And then we can put a placeholder. And then as we get closer, as POAMs are closed or things are happening to actually work at making sure that you're implementing these controls, and you say, ooh, we're actually going to take a month longer than we thought, like communicate with us. We can work with that. We can move you around a little bit and prioritize you since you're already a contracted client at that point. So depending on how you want to work a little bit, I agree with your point, Mike. And I think that's kind of the generally safe approach in terms of, hey, I feel confident that these things are just going to happen over the next few months. And so let me get on your schedule. But I also would, knowing some backlogs, engage in conversations, potentially contract even sooner, and then just communicate with them and keep them up to date on, what your project plan looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I just did a search. There are currently 87 3CPOs.
Yeah.
As of today, as of just now, as I'm looking.
Right. Rapid expansion.
Yes. There were 82, I think, the other time I looked. So they're moving up. They're moving up, but it is a slow progress.
Yes. So Bobby, can you talk a little bit about managed service providers? So they're in scope. What do they need to be thinking about right now as they support customers who are looking to be CMMC Level 2 certified?
Yeah, so certainly external service providers such as IT MSPs or they may not require a level 2 certification themselves if they're not processing, storing, or transmitting CY, but they're certainly going to be in scope for the services and the support that they provide the client, the OSC. So therefore, their tools, their practices, and how they support ultimately how they support the client, that will be assessed thoroughly during the assessment. So they need to make sure that they're aware of that and they're positioned to that. And then my advice is they should align their service offerings, right, to meet the NIST 800-171 security requirements. So that therefore they're, again, kind of back to the tools and software capabilities that they're aligned with auditing and logging or configuration management and amongst several other technical multi-factor authentication. Certainly a lot of technology that they bring just to ensure that they are aligned to meet the 800-171 requirements. Also, again, oftentimes we meet with clients and they have service provider, and they often do have the technology in place to meet compliance, but they don't have much documented in the forms of like network diagrams or other documentation that will support that. So I think that's really important as a service provider to understand those responsibilities to guide your client through a successful certification.
Yeah, all good stuff there. Any other thoughts on the IT provider?
I would say they should know they're part of the team. I've attended quite a few conferences that deal mainly with MSPs that are attending the conferences, and there's a wide range of misunderstanding of what their role truly is, to the point that Bobby made. Like, they don't have to have their own level 2 certification, but if they don't, then they're that much more involved in the assessment of their clients. And we're seeing some MSPs actually turning away and saying, we don't want to deal with that. So, as an OSC, make sure your MSP understands their roles and responsibilities and are willing to step up and take care of that for you.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Knowing that they have a role, and also I think that's so important from the OSC standpoint. We've been on the assessment side of things, supporting clients and their readiness, and they have had a reluctance to include the IT provider and even the interview sessions. And sometimes it's a cost factor because they're being charged a fee to participate in those sessions, but they're critical to the success of your certification. They're going to have to be part of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we've also seen it where the service provider didn't quite understand. It was a remediation project, right? So a fairly lengthy project. They didn't quite understand all the time commitment that was going to be involved with the artifact collection and the validation and interviews and so it was a little overwhelming. They didn't quite understand what they were getting into, right? When they learned that their client was pursuing CMMC Level 2 compliance. So they learned a lot in the process, but certainly it was something that was noted that are like, wow, we didn't understand it was going to be such a grind, right, for the service provider.
Yeah, I'm glad we're touching on this. I think this comes up a lot, and I would just echo that. I think it's very important that they understand, MSPs understand, they have a very important role in this. They will be part of the assessment scope. You do not need to be level 2 certified, but you can if you want. So yeah, I run into that a lot. So I'm glad we're touching on it.
Yeah, they're super important to it. Some people sort of overestimate what their role should be. Some perhaps underestimate what their role should be. So definitely know that you have a role and seek to understand what it is, and reach out to one of us if you need more information about that. In terms of other stakeholders here, the RPOs and the C3PAOs, we're going to be increasingly busy. Before we got started today, we talked about our back-to-back meetings and everything that we're facing there. So as OSCs, just recognize that, and again, do those outreaches as early as you can to seek that support so that you can get the support that you need aligned with your priorities and timeline.
And I would recommend, if you're an OSC and you've kind of been bare knuckling it, going it alone, feeling you've done your self-assessment, feel free to reach out to an RPO before you get to a 3CPO and say, hey, can you do a little mock or a review of our documents to see if we are aligned based on that interpretation thing, you know, that I feel I'm doing it. We've checked that box, but is that what a 3CPO would really feel would check the box, or DIBCAC if they're coming in? So, you know, feel free to reach out to that RPO and say, hey, can you just give us a quick review?
Talking about how to prepare now. So we talked a little bit about this is a great time that you should be planning and budgeting and figuring it all out, because we know that that self-attestation is now, and that C3PAO formal assessment is probably soon. So the kinds of things that you should be tackling right now, where would you want to start? And I actually really liked Mike said the unknown timelines, and there are certainly things you can't plan for, but what should these organizations be thinking about? From what are the things that are going to take a really long time, so we should tackle soon? What are the things that I really need to make decisions about early? Where would you suggest that they start? And Bobby, maybe starting with you on, because you deal with a lot of these organizations as they're getting started.
Yeah, so it's not really listed on the slide, but I think before even considering a gap assessment or gap analysis is really just determining your contract exposure rights. I know we talked about it a little bit. It's really just having a thorough review of your contracts, and kind of seeing what the CMMC requirements are for them, right? So naturally, if you've been a long time defense contractor and you've had 7012 clauses, multiple contracts, you certainly are processing, storing, and transmitting CY, probably pretty confident that that's going to translate into 7021 clauses and obviously a CMMC Level 2 third-party assessment. But you know, if you're unsure, we're starting to see a lot of clients as well that are not yet in the DIB, but they're positioning themselves for future work. So then I think, you know, conducting a gap assessment, right, with someone who understands the framework, understands the what's going to be required for compliance and for certification, and just again focusing on your CUI environment and where that information is flowing.
And I would say scoping. Okay.
Yeah.
Understanding your scope. Don't overscope, don't underscope. You know, it's really critical to know where is that CUI environment that you're going to want assessed. Do you have an enclave? Is it in your entire enterprise? That saves everyone a lot of time and effort if you can truly get a grip on what your scope will be.
Yeah, scoping critical. We still see this issue. We have a lot of clients that come to us, actually start the assessment with us, and some very basic scoping like asset types, where, you know, what and where are CUI assets, what and where are security protection assets, a lack of really understanding or clarity on what those should be or where those are. So start at the very beginning. The DoD actually has some really great guides in terms of their Level 1, Level 2, Level 3 scoping guides and assessment guides. Those are really great documents that I always point clients towards. Those are great places to start. They kind of overview what are the different asset types. They give some examples and things like that. And obviously, if you have further questions, that's where, you know, RPOs, really great partners, help to dig into the weeds after that high level understanding on like, okay, but for me, you know, what asset types are we looking at here? What is my actual scope? And then I always tell people, you know, CMMC is not an organization, you know, certification. We're certifying like an information system can protect this sensitive data, right? So it's really data centric. So you need to follow where is that data flowing and make sure that you have an information system designed and scoped to protect that federal contract information, controlled unclassified information. And then what we do as the C3PAOs is we come in and validate, okay, for the determined scope and boundary that all these assets should be within, Are you implementing and meeting all of those 110 controls, 320 assessment objectives within it? But oftentimes at the very beginning of our assessments, some of these very early steps, I think were kind of skimmed over in terms of properly understanding scope. And that obviously just has massive ramifications down the line, because then once you get into implementation, you're looking at certain tools and how many users do I need in GCC high or whatever it is. It's like, well, if you haven't properly thought about or planned for scoping out at the very beginning, you could be going off in the wrong direction there, right? Maybe buying more or less tools or provisionings of licensing than you need and those sorts of things. The other thing I would say is don't speed to a certification with a minimal scope just for the sake of saying you're level 2 certified. Make sure that it is actually operational, right? Make sure that with your current process of how you store, transmit, or process CUI, but also is a 3-year certification. Think about over the coming years, how may we, in the award of future contracts, store, transmit, or process this CUI within our system and make sure that our boundary and our scope that we're getting certified can handle all of that. Because we have seen some people that raced out of the gate just to say they're level 2 certified ASAP. What they did is they minimized their scope as much as they could. They're like, okay, just one person has access to all of our CUI. Nobody else is going to touch it. It's just that one endpoint, this one system in scope. And it's like, okay, cool. That's a very minimal scope. We can surely assess and certify that. But then they're going, oh, well, now we actually need to pass the CUI around a little bit to actually do this contract. And it's like, yeah, you need a new assessment then, right? Because you have a completely new boundary. So definitely strategizing correctly and thoughtfully at the very beginning. Measure twice for sure, because it has big ramifications down the line just for implementation, but then also certification and continuous compliance requirements from there.
Yes, that's a great point about scalability, planning for the future, not just for this right now moment. What about supply chain? So that is one of the elements that comes in with this new clause, that it really talks about the flow down of that requirement to the supply chain. So what are you seeing or hearing from organizations about their concerns related to their supply chain, their vendors, the organizations that they may need to flow this information down to?
I see that a lot in manufacturing and construction organizations where they have a lot of subcontractors doing small bits and pieces of a job, and they ask that question a lot. Do I have to flow this down? And as part of our scoping that, Matt spoke so great about, it is literally understanding your data flow, right? It is about the data. So are you passing the CUI or FCI data down to your subs? If you are, then they must meet, per this new DFARS clause, those requirements. You have to flow that down. So if you're only passing contract information, they can be level 1. If you're passing some CUI that's required for your subcontractor to do the job, they have to flow down that level 2 certification, as it should be flowed down to you from your prime if you are a sub.
That's right. I think this is going to that's an area that I think we're going to see lots and lots of more questions coming as CMMC does start to hit solicitations and hit contracts. We're going to see a lot more inquiries on that. I want to dig into some practical advice that perhaps companies need to hear as they're moving forward into this next phase of CMMC, and things that they should be thinking about. What are some things, maybe there are myths that you'd like to dispel, or maybe there's just things that you see on repeat when you're working with clients that you think that we should be communicating and conveying? Matt, we'll start with you.
For me,
Sure, I'm happy to start. Well, to touch on a couple of these, I guess I'll touch on the first bullet.
Welcome to Spunk's Oral Care webinar.
That kind of came to mind.
Pluto, Executive Director
Somebody
of
needs-
Spunk.
Is somebody
Got it.
off
Muted
mute?
them. Quick with the trigger. Okay. Evidence driving timeline. So this is another issue that we see is clients not having evidence ready. The good news about the CMMC assessment process, there's a lot of things that you do want to take it very seriously. You do want to go in, again, measure twice, cut once, or assess once. But at the same time, there are allowances through the process, and phase one is the biggest one. And by allowances, I mean there's opportunities for us to catch things and make you guys aware of them before it just turns into, hey, you failed your assessment. And phase one is really the biggest opportunity for that, and it's really what it was designed for. So there's four, without going into too much
those
detail here.
diagnosed with cancer through the prevention and
Unmuted
management of
themselves somehow.
short-term and long-term.
Okay. There's 4 phases of the CMMC assessment process, and that phase one is called a pre-assessment. So I often get a ton of questions around this, and actually, not to turn this into a plug, but just today, just released an episode of my podcast where we dove into this exact topic, what is and is not allowed in phase one of the CMMC assessment process. But the long and short of it is the pre-assessment, there's a lot of misconceptions. The goal here is, are you ready to be assessed? That's kind of the high level of it. If you actually read the CAP, the document, CMMC assessment process document, there's some like subjective language in there around how to push people forward.
Slide, but I can give you a short.
There's language around we as the assessor need to be confident that they have evidence ready, are ready to be assessed, right? Have scoped properly, those sorts of things. Like, okay, what provides confidence? That'll vary a little bit, assessor to assessor. But the general rule of thumb, and driving back to my initial point here, is we have to have confidence that you have evidence actually ready to be assessed, right? On top of reviewing your system security plan in phase one and reading through your documentation, we'll ask and try to get a sense of like, okay, have you thought about and do you have evidence for each of the assessment objectives, not just each of the 110 controls? And oftentimes, we don't have that confidence, we'll say, putting it lightly, and we'll have to let them know, hey, we would not recommend going into phase two right now because we don't have that confidence that you are ready, aka that it will go well for you. And if I have a recommendation on this call, if a C3PAO recommends not going into phase two, I would generally heed that recommendation and not go into phase two. So this is one of the things, right, is that evidence, and if you're missing evidence to the point here, that can cause a ton of delays to the assessment process. And, we're just as incentivized to not walk into a mess as you guys are. Nobody wants this assessment process to drag out, right? So as much as we can at the early end of it and into phase one, we all want to be very confident and on the same page about like, what is going to be asked when do you need to provide what, and make sure that you guys have that actually ready so that there aren't these actual delays in the timelines. I'll hand it over to somebody else for touching on any of these other ones.
I would say that the same thing, that we are finding a high level of OSCs that are not quite making it past phase one. We offer what we call a pause instead of just stopping the assessment. If it's something that they can take a period of time, a smaller month, 2-month period of time to, dot the I's, cross the T's, and come back to the assessment. One thing that we've kind of not hit on is this is not an inexpensive venture. So to Matt's point, if your 3CPO is saying, we don't think you're quite ready for phase two, there's no reason to push the button. It would be an expensive, potentially expensive mistake. And then the tight scoping, we talked on already, but one of the things that we also look for would be that you've done this, that your assessment isn't day one of your implementation of everything. Do you have some historical data to say you've done these things before? It doesn't have to be forever historical data, but we do like to see a little bit more than it was configured and put into place yesterday. Thank you for the assessment. Let's start now.
Yeah, it's a good point, but Mike, just to touch. Oh, sorry, Bobby. I was just to touch on that one really quickly, and I'll let you touch on these. I was just gonna say it's a really good point because I get asked this question a lot actually, is like, because we do like SOC 2 attestations and there's like look back periods with SOC 2, right? 3, 6, 9, 12 month look back period. This is a point in time assessment. There's not a specific look back period, but I always try to summarize basically what Mike just said, which is like, At the same time, we're going to ask, hey, your policy and procedure says you do this. Show us you doing it, right? So think if you just put this policy and procedure in place, but you don't have examples of you doing it, that's going to be tough to prove to the assessor that you're meeting the controls, right? So I think Mike brought up a really good point there. So I just wanted to stamp that home, that like it's not like you need to show 6 months of scan results or 9 months of XYZ, but your assessor is going to want to see evidence of you doing these things, right?
Yeah, great point. From an RPO perspective, from the readiness and assessment prep side, we often will review documentation. So again, organization OSC is kind of ready to kind of engage the C3PO. So we will maybe do a very extensive, comprehensive gap assessment. We'll review their documentation. They have solid documentation, but then when we do the assessment, it doesn't match the reality, right? The way that they operate. And I think you guys certainly probably see that a lot during the formal assessment. So they're in a better position if it's identified with us, than with you at that point. But that's certainly something that we see as well. Just the documentation. Perhaps it was a template that they found or they purchased, and they didn't really do a great job of scrubbing that, and again, just matching it to the way that their organization operates. So it's very easy to identify those discrepancies, when you're assessing a control and an objective.
And I think, Bobby, that goes right into the easy button. Don't always believe the marketing hype. There's lots of companies that'll say, you get us and you're done. The OSC is ultimately responsible for the 110 controls and 320 objectives. And while these organizations can help you and provide some evidence for that, maybe cover that control for you, you're still the one that has to have the policy, the procedure, the implementation for it, even if you're relying on that third party to do it for you.
Yes, that was a huge finding. We did a C3PAO survey over the summer. So we were seeking feedback from the likes of you, Mike and Matt, and your peers in the C3PAO space. What are they seeing? And this was a really big underscored finding in that survey was that kind of they were tired of seeing organizations get somewhat taken advantage of, perhaps, or blindsided by a solution that didn't meet the expectations of that organization. And it could be that people hear what they want to hear and they believed it to solve their problems versus it being anything that was, trying to mislead them or dissuade them. But just a really important thing for all of us to remember. If it sounds too good to be true, perhaps it is, and to truly try to dig in a little bit deeper in what to really look for when you're going to invest in a new technology or hire a vendor to support you in this. Any advice that you would recommend for organizations?
I would say
again,
understand. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just gonna say, ask the questions, especially just on that last note, since you all touched on it really well, is just ask the questions of them to suss out what's maybe overblown marketing fluff versus what's reality. And not just of them, but others in the space. Try to get their perspective, because I'm not saying anybody would, boldly lie to you, although I'm sure some people would. But just try to get multiple perspectives, right? If one vendor is telling you, no, we can do X, Y, and Z, I promise. And then you talk to 3 C3PAOs and you're like, is that true? And they're all like, no. I would trust the people that are going to come in and assess you against those, right? So I would say ask the questions, not just of that vendor in that situation, to dig into, hey, your marketing said this exactly in terms of helping us meet blah, blah, blah. Is that really how it works? What's the nuance here that marketing's not covering? And if they're not getting into the nuance of okay, well, what that means is this, but technically it's split between us in that way, then I would have some alarms going off in your head. But yeah, also ask questions of external providers and their thoughts on it as well, because again, the last thing you want to do is just feel confident that this one person told me this, so let's move forward, and then you get into your assessment, and it's a costly mistake.
Yeah, I was going to say marketing. Since I was young, toothpaste keeps telling me my teeth are going to be 10% cleaner with the new formula. I should have golden pearly whites by the cleaning percentage. That's now 1,000% cleaner than when I started brushing my teeth, as a child. So we know the marketing hype sometimes is built to bring you in. It doesn't actually meet that exact standard.
That's right. That's right. Well, we are going to move into our Q&A as we get close to wrapping up our time here today. I do have just a couple of questions that have been posted here. One is just about the MSPs. Are there any attestations that are needed from your external IT provider? Something that you would expect to see during the assessment?
I would say they need to be a part of your assessment. They can't really attest. The attestment can come during your self-assessment, and have them provide the artifacts, but really think of them as a team member versus someone that can just say, no, I do that for you. That you're going to want to have that proof, that evidence, those artifacts. They are just a member of your team.
Awesome. Awesome. There was a question about CMMC and CMMI. So point about the fact that from kind of a high level view, CMMC sort of mirrors CMMI in structure. I don't know if Matt or Mike are familiar with CMMI. At Alluvionic, we are definitely familiar with CMMI. So I can answer just to an extent. When CMMC was first introduced, the initial CMMC 1.0 was absolutely structured very similarly to CMMI. The 5 maturity levels, really you could only certify for 1, 3, and potentially 5, very similar to CMMI. So in terms of being related, I don't think there's a firm relation between CMMC and CMMI other than having that maturity model kind of connection and being rigorous. CMMI is known to be very rigorous. Any additions there from Matt, Bobby, or Mike?
No, I would agree, especially like when you look at the levels and the goals and the process maturity, it was very similar to CMMC 1.0, which got a lot of pushback, to be frank, which is why we have what's referred to now as 2.0, which is a little bit different. Instead of those 5 levels, there's 3, and instead of like process maturity and improvements, there's just, hey, meet these controls and have a point-in-time assessment of a C3PAO coming in and showing that you're meeting those controls is kind of the long and short of it. So there are some similarities in some aspects, especially to earlier iterations, but I would say to the current version, they can differ quite a bit.
That's right. So I have another question on here. A lot of small businesses or subcontractors don't have the funds allocated to put these controls in place. What advice do you have for these small businesses that are kind of in this place now where they've got to take action?
Well, sadly, there's meet or don't meet. There's not a poem anymore, to have certification. What I recommend to small businesses is going back to that scope.
Yeah.
What can you do to reduce your scope and thus reduce your costs? Virtual environments are a great way to reduce scope. If you have, 2 people out of your 5-person organization that views CUI, can you set something up like that? So it's all about figuring out how do you minimize that scope so you can minimize your cost, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. That was the first thing that came to mind for me. And again, keep in mind though, what I said earlier, don't minimize it so much just to get, the cheapest implementation and cheapest certification you can. Think about, okay, but we actually have to store, transmit, and process CUI. Like, what is the minimal scope that we can still perform this work and
Correct.
doing that
Yeah.
CUI while keeping it mitigated? So, I mean, it's a tough situation. It is probably the top pushback or question with CMMC is like, hey, there's a lot of small businesses that this will wreck us. This is way too much. Unfortunately, we've gotten to this point where the DoD says, hey, we just no longer trust your self-attestations because we have years of data showing that they just do not work in protecting our sensitive data. Our adversaries are getting from our contractors and subcontractors really critical information that is allowing them to catch up in certain technology aspects. So they're done messing around. They're basically saying, hey, whoever can serve this market financially can serve it, but part of it is you're going to have to meet these requirements because we're not going to put up with basically losing our competitive advantage against our adversaries as far as the DOW is concerned. So they've taken a pretty hard stance. Now that leads into this question of like, hey, they've taken that stance, but still, like, how can I do it? Minimize the scope. Also, I don't want to push anybody away, but a lot of organizations are having to make the decision of like, okay, how much work do I or do I anticipate doing in this space? And maybe they're making the decision that it's just not financially making sense for them to do it anymore, right? If it's a tiny amount of your current business and you don't see that potential, you don't see a growth path to doing that, and this, implementation and cost is going to cost more than you make on the only contract that you ever envision getting, yeah, I would say don't do it, right? Like, and that might be a tough decision to make, but I think first and foremost, follow Mike's advice. Get with somebody who can help you understand your situation a little bit better and kind of business plan with you to say, well, let's make an informed decision, right? I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do in terms of what is the right move, if they should get certified, when they should, but I just want people to have all of the information that they should have. And so I think not just from this conversation, but from follow-ons with Alluvionic, Mike and his team, us at Align, whoever, have that deeper conversation to say, hey, here's our actual situation. Like, what could we potentially do from a scoping perspective? What could we do just to reduce this cost as much as possible? Because it is going to be kind of a case by case sort of nuanced answer.
Absolutely. We deal with small businesses. Our smallest is a space engineer working out of his home office. One person dealing with multiple, prime contractors sending him CUI daily.
Yeah.
So CUI daily. So it's, he had to do it. And it's just finding that inexpensive or least expensive. I don't want to say inexpensive. Nothing's really inexpensive in this field.
Everything's relative.
Yeah. Least expensive option based on scope.
Yeah. Similarly, we see organizations of all sizes go through this. So I would, to Mike's point, that's a great point. Like, don't think you're alone in that. There's a lot of people, and potentially even smaller, that are having to make that decision and kind of grapple with this.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, we're kind of coming up to our conclusion. I do want to just leave with how they can contact you.
You have one question. You have one hand up.
Yeah.
Venice has her hand up.
Hi, good afternoon. I understand that there is a large backlog getting the C3PAOs to conduct the certifications. Is that true? And can you talk a little bit about timing in the last couple of minutes? How long will it take if I say that my small business is ready to engage with someone like Align to come in? Can you talk a little bit about timing?
Sure, certainly. And yeah, Mike and I can both touch on and provide as much context as we want in our individual situations, but I'll definitely provide like my understanding of the market just from knowing people in the space and coming to these webinars and all that sort of stuff. It's going to greatly depend on which C3PAO you're talking to. Some of them are larger teams that have more assessment capacity. To be frank, that is where we play. We do have one of, if not the largest pools of CCPs and CCAs. So that's one of our strength areas is that allows us to keep our backlog down. Some of the smaller firms will have a little bit longer of a backlog just because there's less overall assessors to do the work, right? So the more assessments they get in their queue, that's going to build into 3, 6, 9, 12 months long in some cases. So it'll greatly depend on the C3PAO that you're talking to and the size of them. Our backlog currently is operating around 10 to 12 weeks from contracting to starting that phase 2 of the assessment. I would say that's going to continue to amplify. We're going to try to keep that down as low as we can. But that's where we're currently at. So we touched on this earlier a little bit, but as early in the process as you're comfortable and you understand your scope, I would at least reach out. If it's us, if it's Mike, if it's other C3PAOs, I would at least reach out, start that conversation now and say, hey, this is generally what I'm thinking timeline wise. Like, what would we need to do to start thinking about this to make it make sense so that we're avoiding this big backlog issue?
Yeah, we're booked through February. Pretty solid. Again, as Matt says, if we pick up other assessors, grab a pool, hire them from Matt, whatever we have to do.
Don't you dare.
It's that's just where the world where we're at, as Matt said. It depends on the 3CPO, but yeah, we're booked through February pretty solid, taking in March now. So at least 2 to 3 months out, plan ahead to get on someone's books.
Do you both have partnerships with readiness organizations? Matt, I'm familiar with you because I think Summit 7 is one of your kind of readiness organizations you partner with, that they'll do kind of the readiness and preparation, and then your organization comes in with the C3PAO. Do you both have that? Is that the best construct to work with as well? Over.
Yeah, we have partnerships with people to help get ready, or we can help you get ready. And then we have 3CPO partnerships, like we partner with Align for people we've helped get ready, and we pass them to Align. It's a real small, close-knit community, if you will, Venice, because there's so few of us. So
Yeah, definitely. And then I would say, obviously, that's Alluvionic's role in this. And obviously the partnership is there and the trust is there. So consider them if that's a part of this that you're seeking out currently as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Lizzie,
you.
I see we have one more hand raised. Do we need to wrap or?
I want to just say, we'll send this out after, but I do want to just, at least so that you can have the contact information for our presenters. We'll send out the recording so you'll have access to it, but here's your contact info. And if we want to take this last question, Sylvia?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for your time. I appreciate all the information. I don't know if it's the right place to ask this question. I'm not a business owner looking for help with my CMMC. However, I'm a cybersecurity analyst and a consultant. I'm just wondering, how do I join your team, either as a junior or whatever? What is the right procedure? Because I've been following you guys for some time. I love what you do, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Beautiful. I'm not sure who you were referencing in terms of who you love. It could be all of us, but we can certainly
we'll assume
all
that.
follow
We'll
up
assume
with you.
You love us all.
Yeah, we'll assume you love all of us. I mean, we can certainly follow up and each individually, talk about what a career paths would look like. No issues there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I
Thank
put
you
in
so
the cyberab.org if you want to become an assessor. Sylvia, that's the best path to join into this community. Just in general, if you're speaking CMMC, and they have the different pathways to the different professions within this ecosystem.
Yes, please. And where should I go, sir?
cyberab.org.
Okay.
I dropped it in chat if you want to look at it.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you all for attending today. Thank you to Matt, Mike, and Bobby for your contributions, sharing your insight. Great discussion. Super appreciated everyone's participation. And we look forward to supporting and working together in the future.
Yeah. And thank you, Lizzie. What a great moderator.
Yes.
So thank you, Lizzie, and the Alluvionic team, but thank you all.
Thank you. I got to get one of these good microphones.
I told you don't even need to turn it on. Just have it in camera. That's all you need.
Thank you.